So, for a mage build, I don't really have an easy way to explain this gear, but so basically, this is what you're wanting is you're aiming for skill crit, if anything, right? You want like a healthy amount of skill crit, and then you want a stupid amount, if anything, like if you were going to go in the tweaks setting, right? Like, I found that if you supplement a lot of your skill crit and you start off with that in the mind, you can get like a stun set or a regen set, and that works fine too. Like, if anything, I would ultimately try to build up to a regeneration set if you can, because what you can do is make yourself incredibly tanky. And this is very similar to the Necro build that I was showing you guys the other day, because in a lot of ways, Prophet and Necro right now are kind of, I feel like there's kind of a very similar path in the way that they operate. The main reason why this class works the way it does, though, is basically, I'm dumping as much as I can into skill damage. I'm a little less, focused on the HP element of it, and I'm kind of trying to keep my defense and HP and my attack roughly around the same, while giving myself some skill crit. All right. Then on the class awakening element, you swap your pal seal for a skill seal. Okay. And then this is where I really think anybody or everybody should get Cloud Drifter, because I think Cloud Drifter is kind of where this particular part of Mages, more specifically Prophets, really starts to shine. Okay, and then as far as the actual pals, I mean, this is the current rotation that I'm using, where basically you just stun the living bejeebus out of somebody and use Treasure Dragon for the skill. You get active skill, energy, regen, and then for a little bit of help to keep you alive, you use the deer. And you could conceivably, if you wanted to go a little heavier on damage, you could throw the cat in instead of the deer. But, even, say if you had Puppet Fervor, you could try and increase your shields or give yourself the tortoise to try to give yourself a little edge. If you get the regen set and you fully max it out, then you'll throw Kung Fu Panda probably in place of the Fox, just to give yourself that little extra edge. And as far as the artifacts are concerned, or at least the enchants, your enchant of choice is going to be Elemental Wrath, and you're going to want to probably get a 4-piece set of it so you can get global skill damage up by 10%. And then this is where I feel like, obviously going for combo damage, like you're going to pay attention to this top stat here. So like here I've got a PAL damage Furious Gale. It'd be more advantageous to get anything or everything that's going to bonus, anything from stun to, ultimately you're aiming for anything that's going to give you that extra edge. So that could be skill crit, that could be skill damage, that could be skill crit damage. These are all the things that you're going to need as a Prophet. And regeneration is just kind of this all around. Most builds will find that having regen is really helpful, because if you can get a 5 or 6% regen, you can throw in your skill rotation like a shield or a stun, and you can basically mirror yourself in terms of what you've got. Obviously, Crimson Moonfall, Star Array, I think are just givens. Clone Strike is helpful if you want to, live longer. As far as like what you can do in terms of stuns, I would say if you don't want to use Disarm, you can take Disarm out, and then you can either use Blitz Assault and go down the Blitz path, give yourself that little bit of damage immunity. You can throw Gust in and give yourself a 15% attack bonus. I know some people that would try to use Meteor Fall for the 30% skill damage, but I don't think it's worthy of anyone's attention. I mean, really, if anything, a lot of people will probably do one of two things. They'll either throw a Shroom Shield on like that, and then use the regen to basically pop their heals and work their way up. And then as far as like back accessory talents are concerned, one direction you can go with this is to basically take advantage of Moonfall and basically take as many skill casts as you can to get as much damage put out. You can also go down the restore HP route. So like, for example, instead of, so you can do a quick upgrade this all the way. And then also probably go ahead and grab the Endless Outburst. And then what you can do Now that you've done that, is you can choose to get active skill energy regen if you want it. I mean, otherwise, a lot of people would probably... I mean, you could consider... Like, here, I'll show you an example. Alright, like, let's say you want to go stun. Instead of going down the path of... You know, like, you can go for skill crit down here. You can also get skill damage. You can also grab skill damage, I believe, over here somewhere. Yeah, right there. So there's like 2 places you can grab it. But one thing that some builds run are complete stun builds. And the advantage of doing it this way, so again, just to show you. And again, I think you still want to have this. This is, in my opinion, the prize jewel of the talent tree now. And regardless of like what build you're using, because this is really, really helpful, I think. But you don't want to neglect your attack by any means. So you want to make sure you grab attack, and you want to grab HP, and you want to grab defense. That's one thing about this class, is that I know some people like to make them flaky, where they're just super all in on attack, but that just doesn't seem like the way to do it, in my opinion. Like, I think you really ought to invest into the actual boosts and just give yourself that a little extra edge. And the resistances, I mean, your only pain, really, I think, a lot of the time is combo. So you can probably dump a little bit into combo. Then you can grab, you know, maybe a little bit of active skill energy regen if you want it. All right, but now let's say you do this, and then I've got a somewhat okay set of stun. So you'll see that brings my stun up to like 35%. And what's unique about that is so... I'll say... Oh, goodness. You throw in the time statue. Obviously, you're going to want the Demon's Mask. I still think Stone Tomb makes more sense here. And then you would want to use Thundercallic Kite. And then Magic Box is useful for the cat and deer, but, you know, if you weren't going to use deer, then you might be using panda, for example. It all really depends on what it is you're using. I mean, you can also potentially throw in the fox. Like I said, it kind of depends on what kind of run you're wanting to do with this build, but if you do all of that, and then, say you just hop into PvP, so like right now, I'm like 47k, so we can go up to like a warrior here. I can kind of show you how this works. Because again, the idea for this particular build is you're death by a million cuts, but you've got the tankiness, and you do almost all of it with skills. Now you see how that worked? So now if, let's say, you go against like a combo, and I gotta find somebody that's reasonably close. I don't want to get too high up there, because otherwise it's harder to explain. Like this one's 45k, so it's like 2,000 below, but even this, you can kind of see why a plume still kind of, you know, has the advantage, even though, you know, it's a prophet build. It works great against warriors and such. And if you go against like an existing prophet, and say like we just compare these two, obviously it gets completely shattered by that guy. And I point that out because the way that class worked, as opposed to what I just did, and we look at torque, so let me just grab him out here. Okay, is what he's done is he's not used stun so much. Obviously his actual gear isn't as probably as garbage either. You notice he doesn't have his regen up, but what he does is he'll increase crit resistance a crazy amount, and then he'll go super high into skill crit damage, and skill damage. And then the rest of it, almost all of it, goes into attack bonus. Which, I mean, considering that a lot of these mages that I've seen, like, that's an example of a mage, but like, let's say we look at someone that's like a higher level mage. See if I can give you a better, like, idea of what I've seen out there, because that's a lower level mage. So like Al Gore probably. and a little different of an approach. Because again, the emphasis is, yeah, he's got some stun in there, he's got evasion, but you'll see he has 6.97% regen. And then for the actual skill crit, he's at 50%. He's got some into skill crit damage, but you'll notice the skill damage is like 1500. And then if you actually look at his overall, you'll see that he actually tries to keep that relatively even, and he actually has more HP that does attack bonus. And I think that's part of why that like works the way that it does. I mean, this is just something that, you know, I'm playing the same principles basically of what a Prophet build is doing on a Necro build, and that's, you know, even with you know, like I was using the Storm Necklace, it's really common for people to use this instead for Crimson Moonfall. And that's just because of just all the damage that you can get with the successive casts that come off of that skill. You know, and considering that, like, I've been using Cloud Drifter, you could also just as easily use Magic Carpet. And I'll throw on, like, maybe not so much a set that's focused in on directly, like... So I've got, like, a kind of a whole a mixed bag, how do you say, of gear that I'm still working on. But a lot of it comes down to having really good regen, and you want a lot of that. And so you would just basically swap out like Alpine Fox for the Panda. And then with that in mind, I mean, I would say the only thing that you can almost guaranteed you're going to have is going to have Hydro Sprite, you're going to have Fire Retail. You might use someone like Snow General if you want to slow their attack speed down, to just kind of cut down on like combo builds and stuff. But the idea and principle here is that by doing it this way and giving yourself that tanky regen and that shield, you're just going to rinse and repeat, and it makes you a really decent Prophet because of that. Now, Dark Lords, you know, it's like the skill crit is already going to be there, but like if you look at my stats now, I mean, at 20% stun, isn't doing us a whole lot of justice in the talent tree. So that's why I don't really like using the stun so much. I tend to really kind of go down Endless Outburst more often than not, just because of all the HP that you can gain in there. Now, simultaneously, you could go about it a little differently. You could go down the Fury path, grab the regen in here, and that is another way to approach this, is to basically pick up all the regen. And then, and again, this goes back to principles here, is making sure that you increase your HP, your attack stat, cores, once you've gotten them. Because, again, I think this is where a lot of people get carried away, is you don't want to miss out on those. It's a lot of good core stat, right? But, you know, once you've actually gotten all of it, which I've almost got mine almost all the way, alright, doing something like that, you'll see that my regen should be a little better than it was. Let's see. So it's a 3.54. It's a little higher, right? You notice I never mentioned avians, and that's because, I mean, really, most of this is really dependent on what you're doing, but most of the time, what people will run is they'll run the Cloud Lightning skill from Dense Cloud, and you know, that's what's going to give you that extra little energy regen that you need to be able to pop your skill off more often. So if you're going to go down the Prophet route, or even if you were going to go that Necro build route, I think Dense Cloud would probably be handy for you if you want the energy regen. And there's different avians to kind of play different playstyles too. It's just, you know, it's like anything. But, you know, even now, so like right now I've got a fair bit into skill damage. I could take like what I have in the defense stat here and dump that more into skill damage. And in fact, even take the skill damage I got there and dump it more into this. But you'll notice that there are diminishing returns on doing that. So even though, sure, I've got like 282 now, right? You'll look at your skill damage, and even though it's at 776, like, that's pitiful. Plus the skill crit's not even there, right? Like, you got to get it from other places. And so that's where you may end up having to do it in talents. You may end up having to do that even in potentially going out of your way and upgrading, your souls and trying to get it up a certain way. But like that's kind of the how do you say, the issue that you often find yourself in when trying to adjust these. And I guarantee you that what makes or breaks a lot of these builds is actually going to be in here. Like, the 2 or 600% I'm getting in here could be towards, like, so the, like, here you got counter, you got pal. Every once in a while though, you'll see combo will show up in here, and then you'll see skill damage show in here. And the trick is getting a skill damage pink soul that is one of the elemental wraths. That's the trick. But that's what you're going to need in your artifacts, and that's what's going to make you a really good prophet. And vice versa. You could also make the argument for a lot of the other skills, but that's where a lot of those stats are coming from, in case you're wondering where to get them. But otherwise, really, as far as the actual mage class is concerned, this is really about everything I know so far as the mage build is concerned, and the different ways that you can go about it. I know that a lot of the late game players tend to find that if you make it tankier, it's going to last you a little longer, because you've got to get through a lot of those combo builds. And like a lot of them, you could see that kind of the idea was to mulch that player's HP like immediately, and also give yourself enough stuns or a shield or something that would delay them long enough for you to be able to kill them. And that's really kind of the strategy within the Prophet, and really not even just Prophet, but Dark Lord mages in general. But hopefully that was somewhat helpful for you guys. Of course, if you want to save some money, check out this part of the video, and thanks for watching.